So a little bit about who CEB is. We are a member-based advisory and research firm. We do research into best practices across really all the different corporate functions. So as you could imagine, we speak to heads of HR, finance, IT, legal, and specifically the group that I work with is sales and marketing. And so we go out and we talk to these commercial leaders and ask them, what are the big challenges that you face? What are the things that you're dealing with and the hard parts about what you do? And as we collect that information, we then do research to understand, all right, well, how are certain companies overcoming these kinds of challenges? And what are some of the best practices out there in terms of overcoming some of these? So as we go and we speak to all of these different people, one of the things that we've come to see is that the nature of customers has changed dramatically over the last few years. And what we're finding is that buyers are becoming very empowered for a lot of different reasons. And in no particular order here, all of the things that you see on this particular page, thinking about, first of all, the rise in consensus decision making. You know, it used to be that we could go talk to the one person who would make the decision. And now, many times when we go in, there are a number of different stakeholders who have to be involved in the decision. And this is not just simply the decision maker and that person's direct reports. It's people from a variety of different areas. We have to talk to the finance director, the IT director, the chief of marketing, and so forth. And all of these different people have to come together. In fact, in our research, we found, on average, there are about 5.4 different people involved in making a decision. And so as you can imagine, what happens? Well, it slows everything down, right? Because we have to align to all the different needs of those stakeholders and what their objectives are. In addition to that, we're seeing tremendous increase in price pressure. And that's for a few different reasons. A couple of the things that you see up on the screen here. We look at things like the intensity of global and local competition. You're not just playing against, you know, the people in your neighborhood anymore. We're talking about all over the world, and we're seeing these massive increases in terms of competition. In addition to this, the thing that you see up at the very top, the explosion of access to information. As we see the advent of the internet, we see people have access to so many different things. And it's funny, once upon a time, we used to expect that we could rely on our sales teams to educate the customer. They come in, they can tell all about our products, our services, and so forth. Not anymore. Customers can educate themselves. They don't need to rely on sales to come in and teach them. You know, I think about, if you imagine perhaps when you went to buy a car at some point, let's say, and you could imagine you walk into that car dealership and you say, you know, I understand that you sell cars here, so, you know, why don't you tell me more about your cars, okay? Did anybody do that? Probably not, right? What more likely happens is we go and we do all the research before we even walk in to talk to that salesperson. We go online, we look at what make, model, year, color, options, whatever it may be. We go look at all those things, and we probably even do some benchmarking on price. So that when we walk into that meeting, we sit down and we say, here's exactly what I want, okay? And here's what I want to pay for it. Can you do that? And at that point, what can they do? They can say yes or no. And if they say no, we just go somewhere else and we try it again, okay, until we get what we want. Well, that's a tremendous amount of pressure on our sales teams, right? And what happens in that moment is that they essentially become transaction managers. They just manage the transaction, and that's it. We've taken away their ability to sell. The final thing, demand for greater customization. You know, it was not like the days of Henry Ford when he started mass producing automobiles, and he would say, you can have it in any color you like, as long as it's black. Okay? Well, that will not fly anymore, right? Now customers expect that they're going to be given things the way that they want, and they want that level of customization. So all of a sudden now customers have this tremendous amount of power. And what happens when they go into making a decision, they start off with expecting that they have some need, all the way to they're ready to make a purchase. And what we found in our research is that if you can imagine, how far along in that path do you think they go before they actually contact you as a supplier? How much work are they doing before they come to you? Well, we found in our research that they're over halfway through the decision process before they even reach out to you to begin to speak. 57% of the way. Now, this number isn't the most important thing. What's important is that they have done a lot of work before they come and begin to speak to you. And what are they doing during all that time? Well, it's everything that you see here, okay? They're scoping out their needs, their specifications, they're thinking about different solutions, they're doing benchmarking on price and so forth. So they do all of this work up front so that by the time they finally come to you and they're ready to start talking, it's usually in the form of a bid, a tender, an RFP. And they say, here's what we need, can you do it? And you say yes or no, right? And you show how you can match that requirement. And then what happens is they say, can you do it? Yes. Can you do it? Yes. Can you? Yes. And they say, great, give me your best price. And then we're stuck. We call that, now we're in the dog and pony show, okay? It's just a big show at that point. So the question is, how do we break out of this cycle? How do we get unstuck here? So let me answer that with a bit more detail. One of the things then that a lot of our commercial leaders came to us and asked was, all right, let's get to a very basic question. What do customers want? Right? Something we all want to know. What do customers want? Well, we reached out to our network of member companies, about 5,000 different customers, and we said, we want to talk to your customers. We want to know what influenced them when they made their purchase, when they made their decision. And what was important to them in making that decision. We collected all of that information back, we ran some statistical analyses, and we got those results, and we found that all of the different things that were important to customers when they made a purchase fell into 4 main categories. Okay? Now what was interesting is when we got those data back, we were surprised by what we saw. So let me share with you the results. That's what you see here, okay? Now most of these factors aren't going to be surprising. So this is how much each of these things contributes to customer loyalty, okay? Their intent to purchase or repurchase from you, how open are they to additional offerings, and how likely are they to recommend you to other people, okay? That's what these percentages represent. Now, the first things here are not too surprising. So we see things like, the power of your brand or your company, okay? The product or the service that you deliver. What is the value that you get for the price you pay? And finally, this thing called the sales experience. I'm going to hold on that for just a moment. Now these first 3 factors, when we received these data back, they were much smaller than we expected to see. We thought these were going to be bigger. Wait a minute, you're telling me that the value versus the price is only 9% of what drives customer loyalty? The power of my brand is 19%. What does that mean? Does that mean these things don't matter? Well, the short answer is they do matter. In fact, they're absolutely critical. You have to get these first 3 things right for the customer to even be aware that you exist and want to have a conversation with you. So you have to build those things and do them successfully. But after that, what tends to happen is that while you have a great brand, a great product, and a great value, many times your competition also have a good brand, a good product, and a good value. And so as far as our customers are concerned, it's not differentiating. It's important that they have those things, but afterwards, it just looks like, I call it the twins problem. Okay? I could take a set of twins and I could put them at the other end of the stage. Somebody could ask me, okay, tell me which one is which? And I would say, I don't know, they look the same to me. But if I took one of their parents, and I could send them back even farther, and I'd say, tell me which one is which. They'd say, oh yeah, that's John and that's David. Okay? And it would be easy for them. It's the same way. We see all the little differences in our offering, in our company. Okay? But our customers don't see it that way. It's the twins problem. It's not differentiating. Now what's interesting then is how do we differentiate? Well, it's this big piece right here. More than half of what drives customer loyalty is what we call the sales experience, or as I often like to call it, the purchase experience. Because it's not just sales, it's marketing, it's service, it's all of the people that interface with the customer and talk to them and work with them, okay? Now the big question then is, okay, well what is this then? What is the sales experience? What are we talking about here? Well, it's all of the things you see on the right side of the page here. Okay? The customer is saying, I want someone who can help me think about my business in a new and different way. Help me see things in my market that I didn't understand in the first place. Help me work through alternatives and avoid risks and damage to my business. Okay? I want someone who can teach me about my business ultimately. And that's what they're saying they're looking for. This is more than half of what drives loyalty. And we're not talking about, will they buy from you? We mean, will they stay with you over the long run? That's what we're looking for. All right, so this is what customers say they want, but let's talk a little bit now about So is anybody doing this? How do we actually bring that to the customer? What is the way that we do it? So we reached out again to a number of different companies, thousands of sellers. And we said, we want to understand, what are your salespeople doing? How do they work with customers? What do they do differently? Because we know everyone has a different set of skills, knowledge, attitudes, and so forth. So we reached out to all these different sellers. We did interviews, we did studies, and so forth to try to look at all these different attributes. And these are just some examples of what these might include. I won't spend a lot of time here, but we tested about 44 different areas for salespeople in terms of how they work with their customers. And what we found as we got those results back was that salespeople tended to fall into 5 different categories, okay, in terms of how they like to work with the customer. Now, these are not personalities. These are skills and behaviors, the way that they interact with customers. And what we found then is they fall into these 5 different categories. We have the lone wolf, okay? They're the ones that like to do it their own way. They don't care about process. They don't like to fill in the details in their CRM, okay? And as I start going through these, you're already going to be thinking of people on your team that fit into these categories, aren't you? I know who the lone wolf is on my team, okay? The next one, the relationship builder. These are the people that focus very much on, how can I help you? And they give their time very freely, and they're very service oriented, okay? Build that relationship. How are the kids? Okay, these are the relationship builders. The next one, the challenger. These are the ones that like to debate. They like to test the status quo a little bit, okay? They're the ones that are in the back when, the manager's speaking, and they're in the back saying, well, wait a minute, why do we do it this way? What if we tried it a different way? Okay, you get some of those in the room. And then we come over to the problem solver. These are customer service representatives dressed in salesperson clothing, okay? They're the ones that, after the sale, they want to make sure everything is just right, and they're going to fix it and help and so on, okay? We sometimes call them the reactive problem solver, okay? Because they're always addressing the needs all the time. And then finally, we have over here the hard worker. These are the ones that are saying, if I can get 50 calls done in a day, that's this many a week. It's all about just working as hard as possible, running as many activities as possible. Okay? So we have these 5. Now what we find is that people, salespeople have skills in all of these areas. These are not mutually exclusive. They can do a lot of these things, but they tend to have a preference in terms of what they tend to rely on or use the most when they're interacting with customers. And so what we found then, and more interesting than this, is okay, great, so different sellers have different styles, that's fine, but we wanted to look at what is it that some of the best people are doing in the organization. Let's look at performance data. And so what we did is we looked at who are the top performers in companies and who are the average performers, and where do they fall in these areas. Now, because what we're talking about here is challenger, the answer is probably going to be a little bit obvious, okay? So you're going to see the exact results here. All right, let me orient you to the colors a little off here, but if we look at first of all, the light shading here, okay? This is the percent of core or average performers that fall into each category. As we look at these, what we found is that in general, there are about 5 ways to be average, okay? It's very easy to be average across all of these categories. But when we look at the dark shading here, the dark blue shading, something very interesting emerges. When we look at who are the high performers, what we find is that far and away, challengers emerge as far more likely to be high performers than any of the other groups. Now you'll see, all right, the lone wolf, not too bad, it's still pretty good here. Let me tell you something about the lone wolf, okay? You don't want a lot of these in your organization. They're difficult to manage. Part of the reason that they are so successful is because when they're successful, we keep them. When they're not, we get rid of them, okay? Because they're really difficult to manage. So what happens is there's a little selection bias here. The ones that stick around are usually the best ones, okay? And then we look at some of these others and we see that, they tend to fall a little bit lower. So challenger, far more likely. Now what's interesting is we looked at this a little bit deeper. And we said, all right, well, let's look at different sales environments. Let's understand. Are we talking about very simple transactional sales? Or are we talking about more complex, longer sales cycles, more stakeholders involved in the decision? When we look at this, something else, again, very interesting emerges. And we find that the number of high performers in really, really simple environments can be across maybe any of the categories. But the moment we start to get into more complex sales, it becomes very clear that challengers, far and away, are far more likely to be high performers. In fact, they're almost 5 times more likely to be high performers than their peers. And as we said, the world is shifting toward more complex sales, right? More decision makers, longer cycle times, and so forth. So these become essentially your champions, your best bets. Now the big question then is, okay, well, what is it that they do? Who are the challengers? How are they different from their peers, and what makes them different? So let's dig into that just a little bit, and let's talk about the difference. Now what I've done is I've put up here an example of, say, a relationship builder versus a challenger. Okay? And I had the question beforehand, well, you know, I thought sales was all about relationships, isn't it? Are you trying to tell me that it's different? And when you talk about this idea of challenger, that sounds very pushy, it sounds very aggressive. So let me clarify exactly what I mean here, okay? When we look at the relationship builder, traditionally, a lot of the focus was these kinds of things. They get along well with people, they're likable, they give their time, okay? They bend over backwards to help and so forth, okay? A lot of times when we have conversations where we have different opinions, what happens? Things start to get a little hotter, they escalate. And normally, our typical approach is, whoa, wait a second, and we try to bring that back down. What's interesting is challengers actually do the opposite. We call this constructive tension. They actually turn it up just a little bit, not too much, okay? Because what we find is that they want to test ideas. So what they do are these things. They teach, they educate the customer about their business, help them see things that they didn't see before in their own business. Okay? They know how to adapt that message to different stakeholder types. And they're very good at moving the process forward. They're not waiting on the customer. They know how to drive the value, demonstrate that value, drive momentum in the purchase process. And they actually build some constructive tension. Okay? What that means, the way I like to think about constructive tension is gentle pressure applied relentlessly, okay? You start to get a feel for what that feels like, right? Okay, and that's the idea. So we're helping to test ideas. Now the other thing I want to clarify here is the challenger is not pushy or obnoxious. That's not what we're going for. You will turn your customer off that way. What they're doing is they're testing some of the assumptions, testing the status quo. Well, this is the way you've always done it, but the world has changed, and that no longer applies. PLDT was telling me about how they're going digital now, okay? They're losing the ties, okay? We're changing the status quo, all right? But that's what we're looking for. So they do it in a respectful and knowledgeable way, challenging ideas and trying to ultimately bring their customers to enhance their objectives and to get a better result, okay? And that's really what we're looking for here. So that's the challenger. Now what's interesting about this then is when we go back to think about what is it that customers want, well, we said it was teach me about my business, help me think about alternatives and avoid mistakes. And what the challengers actually bring is exactly that. So what customers want, that 53% of loyalty, and what challengers bring are perfectly aligned. And that is why they're so successful, because they tap into those things that ultimately make customers far more loyal. Okay? What this means is that there has been a fundamental shift in the way that sales works. As we think about over the last few decades and we think about what have we been doing versus what should we be doing, there has been a change, and a lot of this brought about because customers are so much more empowered today. Okay? Over on the left side, this is going to feel very familiar, product-based sales. Okay, this is where we come in and we say, hey, I have a great product, let me tell you all about it. Features, benefits, and so on. And we just tell about the product. And we expect that they're going to love it because, look, it's amazing. Right? We may not even know whether they actually have a problem that this product solves. Okay? But we focus on that. Well, over time we realized, all right, customers are learning more on their own. They don't need us to come in and just sit down and talk about the product. And so we moved into this next area, this question-based. Okay, this is solution selling in many ways. So we come in, we sit down, we ask, tell me what your challenges are. Tell me your difficulties and your problems. What keeps you up at night? Okay? We ask all these questions, and then we learn from them. We take that back, we customize a solution, and then we come and we deliver that to the customer. Now, there are some good skills in that, okay, some good things to learn. But there's two things that are very difficult about that approach. Number one, that is a really hard thing to ask of a salesperson, to be able to sit down with a customer and understand everything about their business. Okay, you almost have to be, an executive director in that customer's business to really get what they're saying, take all that information, customize it, and produce a solution based on it. Okay, so that's really difficult. Number two, it's terrible for your margins. Because if you have to go and have a conversation and customize the solution based on every conversation that you have, okay, now you're running your team saying, well, we got to do it this way, we have to do it this way, and it changes every time. And that becomes really difficult. Not only that, when you imagine sitting down with the customer and hitting them with a number of different questions, who gets all the value in that conversation? We do as a supplier, not the customer. They have to wait until they've told their story, which they've probably already told the same way to the last 5 people that walked into their office. Okay? It's the same thing, there's no value in it. So what we need to do is think about a shift in the way that we sell. And that's this last piece, insight-based or insight-led sales, where we come in and we actually share something with the customer from the beginning that they may not have recognized or they underappreciated in their business, and help them see some things that they hadn't seen before. And so we get to some things like this, hey, I have an extensive set of products, I've got whatever you need, just let me know what you need. Okay? To help me understand what's stopping you get where you need to. Tell me about your problems. Tell me about, what's challenging for you. There's an issue that a lot of customers run into, and they often don't see it until it's too late. And it could be costing your business, as much as, and we give a big figure, okay? And we help to highlight that, help them appreciate something that they probably didn't fully recognize in their business, okay? That's the idea. So all of a sudden now we have this fundamental shift in sales. Now sometimes I get the question, does that mean I have to go from here to here to here? Do I have to go through the 3 steps of evolution? The short answer is no. In fact, in many ways, this is actually a more efficient and easier approach than trying to do a lot of the traditional solution selling. Because what happens is you create insights that can be shared across a number of different customers. Okay? Common problems that a lot of customers have that may not be immediately obvious to them. And that's what we want to talk about is what are those insights about? What does that really mean? We call this commercial teaching, okay? Commercial insights. It needs to have a few very critical components. The first thing, challenge the customer's assumption. Help them think outside of the box, outside of the status quo, okay? I'm going to do these in a slightly different order. Number 2, when they start thinking differently, we want them to do something about it. It's not enough just to say, oh, that's very interesting. Thank you very much. Thank you for that information. We want them to think, wow, I can't keep doing what I'm doing. Let me try something different here. And when they are ready to take action, we want to make sure that they take action with you, right? They say, oh, I see what you're saying. This is a really difficult problem. So what should I do about it? And you say, oh, I don't know. Good luck. I hope you figure it out, right? No, we want to make sure that, we have, here we go, that it leads back to your unique strengths, that you have a solution, and that it leads to your solution and no one else's, okay? And then the final piece here is make sure that those messages, those insights, can be used in a number of different formats, okay? That they can be used with a lot of different types of customers. We take all of these components of a commercial insight and we build them into a type of conversation that we have with the customer, and it follows a flow that looks just like this. So if you can imagine over here on the vertical axis, this is the level of customer excitement. How do they feel? They feel good? They feel bad? Okay? How do they feel? And we take them through this flow to teach them something new about their business. We start with the warmer, which is just establishing our credibility that we know something about their business. Number 2, reframe. What that means is this is where we teach them something different that they didn't realize before, something unrecognized, something perhaps that they misunderstood. Okay? Help them see some differences. From there, we start to talk about the consequences. We call this rational drowning, okay? Because we talk about what is the impact. If you just keep doing what you're doing, here's how it affects your business. It's costing you this amount of money. You're losing people from your business, okay? Then we move into what we call emotional impact. This is where we paint a picture for them. We tell a story. We give an example of what this actually looks like. So whereas this is facts and figures, this one is telling a story, okay? To help illustrate the problem. At this point, they're down, they're feeling pretty low. They realize they have a problem. They realize the impact of it. Where do we go from here? Okay, that's a dark place. We need to bring them up out of there. We can't leave them there. So we move into the new way. This is where we start to talk about generally about what is the solution. Okay, we don't talk about us. We don't talk about our products, our company. We just talk about generally what that looks like. In fact, in these first 5 steps, we're not saying anything about ourselves. Okay? We're only talking about their problem, and then generally what a solution looks like, and then finally we move into the specifics. Now, they say, this sounds great. How do we do this exactly? You say, well, let me tell you, okay? And then we talk about the specifics of that.